Good afternoon and welcome to our latest webinar. Today we're going to be tackling smarter 3PL billing. I'm Craig Robinson. I'm the COO at Clarus, and today we're joined with Matthew Butter, who is our head of solutions. Matt's an ex-warehouse guy, bit of an operations nerd, but there isn't many things in the warehouse that Matt hasn't seen or done himself multiple times over in different guises. So it's a great person to get an insight into how 3PLs operate, well, guess from our point of view, how they bill and how that can be processed through Clarus. We're also going to have a pre-recorded demo from one of our team as well on the new billing update, what you can now do in the system. So we'll get around to that in a little bit. There's a couple of things that we wanted to kind of raise beforehand. One, if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to drop your questions in wherever you're watching it. We're live across a couple of platforms at the minute, so it'd be great to see any questions, and we'll field those as and when we've got a couple of seconds, especially when it comes to things like pricing. You know, we've got loads and loads of requests for different weird and wonderful ways to price 3PL operations. So it'd be interesting to see if this covers your requirements, and two, if there's things that you haven't seen today, it'd be interesting to see what other ways that people are using billing modules to get all of their revenue for the 3PL. In terms of a kind of brief overview of what we're going to be doing today, we're going to do a really quick kind of opening section. We're going to go straight into a bit of a narrative and scene set. We'll showcase the demo of the new module, bring a few updates to other things that are happening in the background in Clarus as well. And then we'll close the session with a Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions in. Just in terms of a bit of a scene set, I guess. Matt, you've lived and breathed most of these kind of operations, and the way that we're going to showcase the billing, you know, you've done yourself both manually and semi-automated to a certain way. Before we get into the product itself, I'd like to kind of just talk around the actual warehouse operations and the solutions that you ran previously. Let's start with just like on the floor. Can you take me back to when you were working in the warehouse operations and specific moments or specific invoices or arguments when billing, you know, was wrong or things just let you down?
Yeah, there were lots of them. The main issue from my experience in my past was the amount of time it took to go through your invoicing. So the whole of a Monday, and some of a Tuesday, especially if we were doing weekly invoicing. It was a system that was automated to an extent. It captured various levels of pick type and receipt type with some manual sundry additions. But yeah, it was a day's worth of going account by account, invoice by invoice, and double checking that what we'd actually done physically was captured and was correct in what we assumed had been done correctly. You could fire those invoices out from the system, which was great, but the system that we had didn't do great reporting. So we'd have to follow that up with an invoice from a finance system, Sage, for example, and it wouldn't be very long before the queries came in. And it was, why have you charged us for this? Why have you charged us for that? We think you only had 2,000 pallets in stock. Why have you charged us for 2,500? So you can't just go back to a customer with, well, because that's how many we had, right? You had to go back and prove it. So you had to say, well, here's what it was on the day that the charging period started, and here's what it was at the end, and this is everything that happened in between, and list all those out and literally talk through it email by email. So yeah, it takes you out the operation, essentially. So while you're doing that, this week's operation is still moving. So it would, just the amount of time in labor was horrendous, really. I managed two distinct types of warehouses in my career. So yes, 3PL or on the service side, but I also managed warehouses that were essentially attached to a production facility. So it was slightly different because the rules within the contract were slightly different, whether it was open book or closed book, which gives you different pressures, of course. You know, the cost of doing the work is the cost that we're getting paid. So you've got to make sure you're within it. So that's a slightly different view of it. Having to look at your labor costs and your agency costs and try and get that split right and still meet customer demand. But yeah, it's just, nightmares is what I get. Nightmares when I think about it. Days and days and days of my literally career lost to digging through invoices and why we're charging that much and having to prove it.
Yeah. You mentioned like there's obviously a massive operational cost in terms of time and like human resource. I guess there's probably instances you can think of where as well as operational cost, there's the cost of getting things wrong and just having to, just take the loss on the incorrect billing.
Yeah, pick it again, go and do stock checks and then stock check again and stock check again. It's all time. If you're in a smaller business, I worked in a couple of startups, first time the business has gone into warehousing, learning on the fly themselves. So, resources are kept at a minimum on purpose because you don't want to hemorrhage costs when you've just started. So, you're taking people out of a picking operation or a receiving operation or whatever to go and double check something. And you go, well, the system says we've got this many pallets and the customer's saying we haven't. So I know we've done all our receipts from last week. I know we've done all our picks from last week. We have to prove 100% that's what we've got. And that's what we're charging for. So you kind of got to the point where you almost lost faith in what the system was showing you, and you just had to go and do it manually. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's a count and then a closing count, and then you have to check those counts, count those transactions, trust the people you're sending can count, which is a big one. Yeah, and everything that involves. And then, you get a tough one that's going to take your day to work out. You're effectively losing a day's worth of resource in your operation. So it just puts you behind again. And if you're behind then and you don't complete your receipts on the right day or your picks on the right day, you're not capturing the charge within the period that the work actually happened. So especially if you're paying weekly, for example, you've already paid somebody to do that, but you haven't recovered that cost because you haven't got your invoice ready for the next week. So, there's lots of spinning plates you have to try and get together to make sure it's done on time, in full, correctly, and then chargeable correctly. So
Yeah.
I've been lost Craig there for a little bit.
One of the things that me and you talk about when we think about our client base and the implementations that we've seen across the last few years is the feedback from people is, we've always done certain things certain ways, but realistically the challenge, and another sentences you like to always reference and bang your drum about, is making sure that every action in that warehouse is making you money. Looks like we're having a little bit. Like, you still there? I think you dropped out then. Oh, well, Matt logs out and logs back in again and see if we can do some standard IT team fixes. I'll go through some of the things that me and Matt see quite regularly. It's kind of what I just kind of alluded to there. The main thing there is when you look at implementing a system that's going to handle, especially like Matt said, some of the transactional stuff that's day in, day out, you need to be able to rely on that system. And, having a data set that sits behind you and is absolutely airtight is a great start. But fundamentally, you need to make sure that once you've got that data and you can rely on that data, you've also got the ability to make sure that every single one of those transactional aspects of your warehouse, whether that be receipting in, doing your stock management, so from put away right through to, kind of stock checks. Every time one of your guys is spending that time, you're recouping that cost. And I think from a revenue generation point of view, that's where billing really starts. That's where we need to make sure that when that action happens, you've got some kind of cost associated to that action. There's really simple examples right across the warehouse. So, if, from a receipting process, we're going to start our H&D and make sure that we've got some kind of a cost associated to receiving, and then also put the put away process. Picking costs are obviously a really good example as well. And then making sure that we've actually got the right kind of billing, whether that be sundry or another, to make sure that we're covering the cost at every single point. It looks like he's back now.
Back, sorry guys. I don't think it can handle the heat. It's just gone, no, not today.
So what I was just saying there is that one of the things that me and you talk about quite a lot, and I know that you're quite kind of bullish on, is making sure that every time there's an action generated from the system, that it's got some way to recoup that cost in terms of revenue. So, whether that be from receipt put away to any kind of stock control mechanism, you're effectively covering the cost of the work that's being generated and making sure that the system, more importantly, just the business in general, has got some kind of way to make sure that every action that is a manual action that's costing you money can also make you money.
Yeah. So you've got to be clear on what's your warehouse costing you and what's your staff costing you. So are you recovering the cost of your rent and your rates and everything through your rentals? Are you recovering the cost of the agency and the labor you've got in place is actually doing the picking, the driving the forklifts and in the back of containers, hoiking boxes off the back of it, and it's got to be captured at the point it's actually happened. You've got to be really clear on that. You can't not pay your staff, right? And you have to pay your direct debits or you have to pay whatever it is that happens religiously. So if you're not capturing what you've actually done as part of your service to cover those costs, then, it's like needle in a haystack. You've got to go start digging through it to go, well, hang on a minute, why are we not covering our costs here? Is our labor rate higher than we thought it would be? Is, the work that we're doing, is it actually taking us longer than we predict it would be? So when we sold our service and we got this customer and we said, yeah, we could do that container in 2 hours, is it actually taking you 3? So what's it stopping you doing? So the idea is if you can get your charges to be automated, it gives you that opportunity to really dig into it. So you get your charges captured and invoiced correctly on time. If you can be confident that that is as close to perfect as it's going to get, then you can start looking at what it's giving you. So it's like, well, as an operation, are we efficient? Are we recovering our costs? And do we need to put our prices up? Are we, we go and benchmark. Are we cheaper, more expensive than everyone else in our industry? And then obviously there's levels within that industry as well, right? So a 3PL, for example, can probably be a little bit more black and white, if you will, on what they charge and how they charge. They go, this is our model and that's our model. Done. But there might be customers and industries out there where straightforward pallet in, pallet out in a week or part thereof as rental just doesn't fit. So you often get some of the smaller brands, for example, would not go into a larger 3PL environment because they just don't stack up. They don't cross over each other. So you'll find some of the smaller businesses, small to medium-sized enterprises would probably have a lot more complex rate cards in that respect because their customers require a lot more spread, so you will. And the larger the spread, the harder it is to automate. So yeah, it's a bit of a minefield, I'll be honest. I've seen lots of different rate cards and it's, you get the companies that say, well, that's what sales sold. So that's how we're doing it. You go, great. But how do you cover that cost? And how do you capture that cost? Oh, I don't know. We've got a spreadsheet that does it with a macro that works it out for us and does. You're like, great, but still, someone's got to put that data in it somewhere. So yeah, there's no, the real truth of it, there's no right nor wrong way of doing charging in warehousing and logistics. There's such a wide range of how it's done and how it's captured. You see something new every week, virtually every week. It's slightly different.
What's it, there's obviously quite a lot of experience that you've had across the industry. What's the kind of typical things that catch people out if they haven't had the experience that, like some of the kind of larger operators have, or people that have got, hundreds and hundreds of clients?
Yes, it's more likely to be via small case pick and pack operations. That's where it starts getting really quite down to finite detail. So it's how often do you walk to that pick face, right? So if you walk into that pick face, how long does it take you to pick a case? How long does it take you to pick an outer? How long does it take you to pick a pallet? Have you got the right cost against that? So what's your cost of sending somebody up there to get it in time? If you did your time and motion studies and just went, well, actually, it takes us this long. So as a portion of that hourly cost for that person, that's how much it should really take if I just picked that one case. So when you kind of get into those levels, you kind of, whilst there might be a rate card because there are rate cards without the industry, and it's people within this industry, they move around, but they move around within the same kind of circle, right? So they've already worked for an operator already. They're just going to take their rate card and move it to a different operator. That you don't know for sure if that rate card that was sold at the original operator was done via time and motion and whether it was accurate. You just go, well, that's a benchmark, so I'll take that. Fine, that's your benchmark, but does it cover your costs? And can you pick that many cases, that many units, that many pallets in that time that enables that recovery? And I'd probably take a good stab at that. Not many people do that process where they go, well, actually, if I went picking and I walked at an average person's pace to my truck and I got on my truck and drove at an average pace to a pick face and then did that, how long does that take? What does that actually cost me? So you could get really into it if you wanted to and do this huge project or whatever, but ultimately you just got to make sure they're covered. But you can't do it to a point where you price yourself out of the market, and you've got to take that into account as well. There's that marketplace force that comes into it that you've got to charge in a way that attracts business and covers your costs at the same time. And getting those two right is not an easy task. Yeah, I don't envy anyone that has to try and work that out.
Yeah, and ultimately you want to make sure that your tech stack that's supporting you can handle the both scenarios of one being, a couple of different charge cards and charge windows across all the customer base, or even the ability to say, actually, for this one customer, we're going to charge them completely differently. So it's going to be a different window. It's going to be a different card setup. I know I've got the ability to be able to handle both scenarios. The 80% of my client base is on one of two charge cards, whereas the other 20% might even have one each.
Yeah. And it's 80-20, and it's that Pareto split. It's making sure you've got your standard cash income that's just covered. It just turns over. And if that can cover the majority of your costs, then great, because then you're happy to take on a customer that's a slightly bit more tricky, slightly more in depth, slightly harder to track and work out and ensure that those charges are captured correctly. But if it's only a small amount of what you're doing, you kind of wouldn't mind so much because it's only a smaller period of your day on invoicing day than it takes to go through. But I know everyone else that's doing pallet in, pallet out and rental, just fire those invoices out. They're good. I know that process works, but these ones are slightly different, and I've got to put a label on it, and I've got to put a warning triangle on top of it, and it's got to be wrapped twice, and it's got to be on double stack blue pallet or it's got to have a blue. You need to check all of those. That's the time consuming piece because, you're almost governed by your SLA. If you've got one, you're governed by your SLA, and if a customer says this is what I want and you've signed up to it, well, you've got to make sure that happens. So everything's got to be involved. Then it's what's the process? What's your SOP? What's your local process for actually getting that in and stacking it and picking it and sending it out the door? And if you do it that way, make sure that everything you've given them that belongs to you, you're going to get that cost back. It could be pallets, it could be wrap. It's all of that involved. There's a wide umbrella that comes to it that you just got to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I guess commercially, it really does stack up in it. If you think about it in the way that you just explained there, where you've got your 80-20 split and that 80% covers your traditional overheads, that should get you to a kind of a net neutral position. And then I don't think there's any operator in the UK that wouldn't take a 20% margin right now. But realistically, that 20% it's the potential margin you could create. Realistically, it's probably a couple of big contracts that are quite labor heavy, but if you can make sure that every action, like you said, every time that you're using some pallet wrap, that's recouped plus margin, that 20% could easily be quite a nice manageable profit margin for your business without feeling like you're kind of dancing this dangerous line that most people are doing at the minute, where they're trying to create a margin in, what are quite stringent times. Every customer's going to be pushing as much as possible, and 3P operators are going to be feeling it as much as most. It's quite telling when you can get to a point where an industry kind of leader is looking at a kind of a 4 to 5% margin, which is, just extremely tight.
It's not a lot. Yeah, it's not a lot.
No.
And there's lots of operators out there that are far, far less, and it's almost like as long as we cover our costs, we're good, And traditionally, you kind of made your money through transport if you operated both, and that's just getting harder. Cost of fuel is going up. But then the cost of sundries is increasing as well. Like, just pallet wrap. Pallet wrap it goes along with the market, the cost of oil, right? So if your diesel's going up, the price of your wrap's going up as well. So you've got to make sure your rate card covers that, because it's going to cost you more to get a pallet of that in. You might not always have the space to get in 15 pallets of wrap. I'll get 2 or 3 pallets a week because that's all we need. But every week you get it, you're governed by what the market price is. So you go, I used to charge £1 for a pallet wrap. Well, it's costing you £1.50, and I think, it's not the greatest of environments. It's tough for the guys, and I don't envy them being there and doing it. I remember it was hard when I did it, and some days I can imagine now it's a lot more difficult in some respect.
Yeah, and that's a really good segue. So one of the things that we appreciate the effort going into making this industry run. I guess on that note, we'll start looking at the demo we're going to do. Moving on to Jack's demo. This is effectively a pre-recorded demo of what we're now looking to achieve in the charging module. So there's been some quite significant upgrades. We're still at a point where realistically there's still more things we'd like to do with charging and billing in the future. But I think everyone will agree that if you're a current Clarus user or someone that's looking at a system, this is a significant step up to 3PL billing. It's not just automated, but flexibility is the main focus here. So we'll stop talking abstracts now, and we'll hand it over to a pre-recorded version of Jack, who's going to go through the demo.
Thanks guys. So today I'm going to jump into the system and show you how to set up charges and how it works within the system. Right, so let's jump into the system then. So I'm going to open up my charge cards. So a charge card is basically a rate card for your business on what you charge for your storage, what you're going to charge for your picking, what you're going to charge for your receiving in, and any sundry prices, which could be miscellaneous items such as pallet wrapping or a new pallet. So if I open up my charge card here, you can see the first thing that pops up is the rental prices. So as I said, this is your pallet storage. You can see here I've got a standard pallet storage setup. My unit of measure is the storage unit. So what are we storing the products on? So a standard pallet. If I scroll across, you can see that I've set for 1 pallet, I'm going to charge £2.50. This is set as an auto charge. So every week or month, whenever your charge window is set to, that will automatically charge for the storage. Just moving down a little bit, we've got a receipt price. So I've called this RHD in because this is when you're receiving a pallet into your warehouse. Again, I've said my unit of measure is storage unit because I'm receiving pallets, and the storage unit type is a standard pallet. If I scroll across, so I've set up quantity of 1. So for one standard pallet, we've got a charge price of £5, and this is also set to auto charge as yes. The pick prices, I've set them up into 3 separate types for this demonstration. So we've got a charge for picking units, we've got a charge for picking cases, so that could be, my example is 6 units of water is 1 case of water, and then we've got a unit of measure of storage unit, which is 1 standard pallet. If I scroll across here, so for 1 unit I'm charging £1, for 1 case I'm charging £2, and then for 1 full pallet pick I'm charging £5. And all of these are also set as an auto charge as yes. Moving down to the final piece on my charge card, then we've got the sundry prices, which I mentioned earlier. These are miscellaneous charges or expenditures. These could be pallet wrapping, handballing, they could be giving someone a new pallet. My example here is pallet wrapping. So for pallet wrapping, it is an item. So for 1 pallet wrap, I'm charging £1.50, and I've got auto charge as no. This is because you can manually add the sundry prices via the front end of the system, or your warehouse operatives can add them as they are doing the actual pallet wrap in the handheld device. The next thing I have to set up is my charge window. So if I jump over to charge windows and I open up my existing charge window, you can see here there's a frequency tab, so you can either set your charge window up to run weekly or on a monthly basis. The weekly basis I have here as an example is to end on a Sunday, so you select the day you want the charge window to end on. So this charge window would run Monday all the way through till Sunday, and then if I wanted it to run monthly, I can select the day of the month that I wanted the charge window to end on. This gives you flexibility because it allows you to set up a charge window and charge however your customer wants to be charged. So now that we've got the fundamentals set up, which is our charge card and our charge window, we can actually now move into completing some tasks so that the charges are automatically captured, and I can show you how that is done. So you can see I've already got 3 pick lists set up, which we're going to be working on. The first one is going to be picking individual units. For this demonstration, I'm going to show you through the front end, but this can also be completed on a handheld device. So we're going to say, yes, we have picked that 1 unit. If you then jump over to your charges, you can see a charge window and the charges have started to be captured. And you can see that 1 unit picking charge has been automatically captured as a result of me completing that task. And you can see the price at the end here is 1, so the total price is 1. Picking charges down at the bottom, 1 picking charge, total price £1. If we jump back to our picking list, we are going to jump into our second picking list, which is CO33, and this is 1 case of water. So 1 case of your water I have previously set up to be 6 units. So I'm going to confirm that I have picked my 6 units or 1 case now. And if I jump back into my charges, because the task has been completed again, you can automatically see that it is updated and it's captured this picking of cases. So as you can see, that the system has automatically captured the picking of cases because the task was completed. We've got a price of £2 here. So we've got 3 picking charges and a total of 3. It's automatically all added up. And then if we jump back into our last picking list, which is going to be a full pallet. So on the pallet, I had 12 units of water or 2 cases. So the last 6 cases I'm going to pick. And as this task has been automatically completed, if we jump back into our charges, you can see that a full pallet pick charge has been added to our charge window, and the price has also been added on there. So £5, it's all been added up at the bottom, and it's given us a total of £8. Now that all my picks have been completed, I'm going to jump back to my view charges and create my invoice. You can see that the invoice has automatically been created and has been given invoice number 2. if I jump over to my invoice, you can see invoice 2 here, and it is with a status of draft, which means I can jump into the invoice, take a look at it and check how it looks, make sure the physical matches the actual invoice and what has been tracked on the system. I'm all okay with that. I'm happy with the subtotal and the VAT that's been automatically added. So I'm going to save and submit this for approval. Now that has been saved and submitted, my customer, or myself in this demonstration, will automatically get an email with that invoice, which is really beneficial because it saves a load of admin time and allows you to focus on other tasks within the system. One of the customers that I'm working with has been able to set up the automation so that every invoice for their customer is automatically sent to an email address. And that completely speeds up the efficiency within her job role. It takes her roughly around 20 minutes now to send over 50 invoices directly to customers, whereas previously it would have taken her hours to create the invoice, download it as a PDF, write an email and attach the PDF to the email and then send it over to the customer. Let me show you how the invoice to emails automation actually works. So if I jump into my automations here that you can see I've created, you can see that the invoice to email, it runs when I've submitted the invoice for approval, which you saw me press that button at the bottom of the invoice. I've set it up so it only runs for my specific account, and over on the right hand side here you can see the trigger is to send a invoice to an email. It allows you to set the file name, what you're sending over, who the recipient is, the subject of the email, what you want in the body of the email, and then also allows you to automatically attach the default invoice. If you wanted to send it to more than one person, if you press add action and create the destination again, you can set it up but then add a different email recipient in here and press save, and that automation would run in the exact same way. The email would still be sent over to both people once you've submitted the invoice. So let's take a look at that email. So if I jump over to my emails and open up, you can see, hi, please find your weekly invoice attached. I can open up the PDF and you can see a detailed breakdown of each of the pick charges. So for my unit pick, we've been charged £1. For my case pick, we've been charged £2. For my storage unit or full pallet pick, we've been charged £5. This has been added up to a total of £8. Add on your £1.60 VAT and you can see an invoice total of £9.60. This invoice you can change to look however you want it to, so you can change it to be all in. I would change the view to look as a summary, so it gives you the number of pallets that you're charging for, not the breakdown of every individual pallet. But on a pick charge like this, you would probably show a detail of all the picks that you have done that week or that month. You can also take the domain logo and put that into your invoice, so you can put your own company's logo in there. So that's everything from charges and automated invoice to emails. So back to you guys.
Can now handle. Let's just kind of stripping back what you've just seen in the setup and going back to the basics. That, yes, from a 3PL, it's quite a significant change, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah. The matrix for it is just far wider now. You know, you're going from unit types, you've got order types, you've got carriers in there. It's the coverage and what is possible now on stuff that's going, you know, items that are going out the door, and how what you can capture is far more friendly to where the majority of warehouse environments are going now, especially those that are linked to marketplaces. You know, you're doing e-com, pseudo e-com style processes that, you know, are smaller items, smaller picks, more of them, high volume, quick turnaround. You know, we live in a world now where you order something on your phone, you get it tomorrow, you know, and that's what we've got to be able to do. We've got to be able to provide that service and then capture that cost. right? So you've got to capture what it costs you and then charge for it. So yeah, it's quite an expansion, and there's more expansion to come as well. So it's yeah, it's really good. And it, from everything that we've seen, myself specifically in the time I've been at Clarus and before that, and then to where we are now, it's that gap is getting much closer, which is really good. It's really good to go out there and say, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can catch that. You know, it's positive.
I guess it'd be really good to kind of go through like a generic use case. You know, we talked about at the start of this session about how, you know, you might have 80% of your customers in one or two charge cards, and then have a kind of a plethora of different charge cards and charge windows to suit the weird and wonderful clients that you want to be able to say yes to, that are realistically going to be more profit centers for you. Matt, can you give us an example of how you might be able to use the new functionality to adapt to some scenarios that we've seen in the past year or so?
I've got one I'm working on at the minute, actually, and it's the kind of e-com side of the business. It's not full on e-com. There's not lots of automation. There's not lots of belts flying around with boxes on them and stuff. But their customer is expecting to be charged differently based on what it is and where it's going. So its size or its order type. Is it trade order? Is it a retail order? If it's a retail order, it carries a different cost to a trade. So we're able to now tag an order to be a type of order and say, well, that's a retail order. And if it's a retail order and it is going international, it's going to buy that carrier. And it's a unit, it's 25p, right? But if it's a trade order, they go, well, it's trade and it's units, but it's going to go as a pallet and it's going to go via a different carrier. It's going to go through a pallet haulier. We're going to charge this. And it's all driven by all these new tags and types that we can capture, which is really good. I mean, being able to do that for us is fantastic, because what you get is these kind of edge cases. Some of them are really, really specific. The majority of what we see or have seen in our client base is they're being able to pick, you know, whatever you term it to be, whether it's an outer, a case, a unit, an item, you know, and be able to pick and charge for all three, and also by location. So, you know, if you're picking from shelving and your shelving is closer together, and if your shelving is close together, you walk less, therefore you should pick faster. And if you're picking faster, it costs you less because you can do more volume in that same amount of time. You know, by the location type you're in, you can say, well, I know I'm picking it from shelving, so I should only really charge for my per unit for that. But if I've got to walk the length and breadth of the warehouse because the type of goods are not suitable to go on a shelf, they have to sit in a pallet in a racking location on a pallet on the floor. Further to walk, heavier to lift, takes longer. So for a unit for that customer, I'm going to charge 50p because that's what it costs me to go and put one on a pallet and take it out. So yeah, having that split is really good. But again, everyone's different, right? And I'd love to say, yeah, we can solve every problem, but you find all kinds of stuff when you go out and see.
Yeah, I guess, and the other side of that commercially is, you know, if you've done your time in motion, you know what your costs are, and you know you can recoup. The chances are you could probably say yes to a new prospect or to an RFP, RFI, and
Quicker.
Be confident that you can be able to fulfill, you know, what exactly they're looking for. The other side of the coin on that is one of the questions I wanted to put to you, Matt. Is there instances where we've gone to an implementation and someone's asked to basically replicate their old system? And what are the kind of strengths and what are the pitfalls of doing something like that when it comes to billing?
Part of our implementation is to say, give us your customer rate cards. We do that way up front because we know the pitfalls that come with it anyway, where you go, that's a mad, you know, is it a gap in the system? Are you doing it the way you should be doing it? You know, why are you charging that way? The general response is because that's the way we've always done it. And we often find that rarely do they have a system that does what they want it to do. Rarely. They have a manual process outside of their current legacy system that they go, we've been doing this for ages. It's really long-winded. We want your system to do it. And it's because they've already realized the work involved, right? And that's not necessarily because the system can't do it. It might be because their rate charges and the way they charge is so complex to automate that process and write the logic for that process is big and costly. And you don't know if that legacy system has got, that's really, really big. And there's lots of if and ors, maybes, buts and possibilities in there that, you know, that just ends up being a huge piece of feature. But, you know, luckily, I think we've seen enough and we've got enough examples, you know, that myself and the guys here have built up over time where we can collect this information and go, oh, okay, you know, we've seen lots of this type of request. Maybe we should think about doing something like that in that way where it helps build that product with those features. Because like I said before, it's just becoming more and more regular. The more implementations we do, the more customers we get, and the more different types we see, you know, and nobody's the same. You know, if it was the same and it was easy, everybody would do it, right? And that's the reality of it.
Yeah, I think that's the way that Clarus has always worked as well. We've grown, and as use cases have come out of the woodwork, we've looked at trying to come up with some kind of solution, whether that be it's like short and medium term solutions, and then full development roadmaps to be able to do significant steps up like this.
Yeah, and there's complementary parts of the system. So as technology improves and more things become available in other areas of our system, automation engines, they start to improve and they become, far more straightforward to implement and use and replicate. And, you kind of go, well, hang on, if we can do that, we could probably do this. And if we can do that, then we could probably look at this thing that we saw 18 months ago that was like, that's really, really tough. I mean, that's just software development in a nutshell, really, isn't it? It's, as technology improves, then all of a sudden your offering can improve. And it just, as long as there's people like ourselves that have been there looking at it and seeing it and have been on the front line and understanding it, you kind of go, yeah, we can try and link all this together. This could be pretty good here. And, we know there are other people out there, other systems out there that probably couldn't do it either. And that gives us that edge.
One of the things to call out here as well is it's not a switch it on and hope it works. There's a safety net behind it. We can make sure that everything's captured, it's working, you're happy. So there's the half step, I guess. Do you want to talk through, let's say, a current customer that isn't using any part of the billing or invoicing stuff that we can do? How would you talk people through on board?
And the process for me is, I've already mentioned, you get the rate card up front, you get a matrix up front. It's show us what you do, and then we'll have, and then let us have more than one session on it if we have to, where we can understand and define and cross-check with what our charging mechanisms can do, and then build charge cards and test them. And testing is absolutely imperative. Out of everything, it's probably the most important thing. If you want the system to drive it, then that is the one thing you have to make sure is 100% correct. Because again, we've already said it, right? You want to be paid for what you're doing. You want to be paid for the service that you're providing. So it better be correct. So testing and UAT and, double checking and cross-referencing and running in tandem and all that, we would absolutely 100% encourage it, because it's just too big not to.
Yeah, that's the main point there. Is like every part of the system, it's designed to be able to run your current process with whatever we're trying to achieve at the same time, to make sure you're fully happy before we actually press the button and go live.
Yeah.
The idea of just being able to run the charging in the background and generate an invoice but not send it anywhere, just to make sure that you're happy with the numbers being created for a period of time as well. When we're saying about testing, it's not turn it onto a dummy account or anything. You can run the entire process, everything up to the point where it actually goes out the door. Just a really strong point, I guess, that the way that we actually implement these kind of updates. The final aspect that kind of Jack covered is quite an interesting one. It's one of those things that generally starts to blur the line between systems, which is invoicing directly from your WMS. You kind of alluded to it earlier on, but there is that kind of blurring sometimes between, what should the WMS do and where does it stop and where does a finance package pick up?
Yeah.
What are your theories on that?
I think in the main, the WMS should capture what it's done as a bottom line. So what are you doing? What has it captured? What transactions does it see? And then get those charged for. There's a very fine line between what you can get out as charges and then considering that WMS to be like a bolt on to your finance package when you're thinking about credit notes and things like that. That kind of logic sitting behind a WMS is probably not where it sits. And then in interfaces or integrations with finance packages is probably the next one. They're all different. That Sage has got more than one version, and each type of interface you put into Sage is slightly different, and things are in a slightly different place, and it has to be in a certain format, and columns have to be in a logical kind of setup, or it won't work. Yeah, all of that kind. It's all part of that UAT process of ensuring that they all talk to each other. They can. We do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that each one is easy and straightforward. We just have to go through the steps, iterative steps, and go, does that work in the way we expect it to? Yes or no? If it's no, why not? Let's have another look at that and just fire that UAT process, get to your end point with it. Yeah. That's kind of in a nutshell.
I guess it's making sure that the scope's set from the outset, isn't it? The WMS is not. It's not going to drive your entire business as finance, but it should absolutely capture anything that is generated in the warehouse. Like you said, when you start looking at what could potentially be affected, i.e., having to credit back and, generate an invoice, but is it actually chasing up and doing reconciliation? Probably not. But yeah, absolutely, you should be expecting your WMS to generate accurate billing for it to then go into a finance package and be chucked in and make sure that you can reconcile and run your business more efficiently.
Yeah, transactionally, it's capturing what's happened. That's the main thing. When did it happen? What type of transaction was it? And is that captured?
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a couple of things that are happening in the background as well. One of the things that we'd like to call out here is that we've actually got an upcoming additional product showcase. We did our first one in Q1 this year, which was received really well. So we decided to go ahead and do an updated one. So we're going to showcase all of the additional features that are generated in Q2. One of which was the updated billing functionality. But there's a couple of other things that we just kind of wanted to discuss so that you guys know what's coming or what's currently available, but what you'll see in more detail in a few weeks' time. One of the things that'd be good to kind of get a bit of Matt steer on is the scheduled pricing upgrade that we've done. Obviously, yourself and Jack and the guys have been quite heavily involved in making sure that we knew what we were building and it suited multiple use cases rather than just one customer. But what kind of problem solution does scheduled pricing solve or provide to customers?
So yeah, essentially it's a recurring charge you can set and you can define when it starts and you can turn it off when it stops. There is a model of pricing out there where a customer will pay for space, and that space costs a certain amount of cash, and you just go, right, well, you're going to use this portion or zone of our warehouse. It's got 5,000 locations in it. Whether you fill it or not, we're going to charge you 10 grand, and that 10 grand is going to recur on a monthly basis or a weekly basis. It's not uncommon, but I see it less often now than I saw it before. But it's quite prevalent in some of our customers, those with more than one warehouse, generally, where effectively they go, that's fine, we can give you that building because we can service the rest of our customers through the other three or whatever. But the fact we're giving you that building means you pay for it. And then your rent and rates are covered, and to an extent, if you're canny enough, that charge also covers any labor. So you might have to ship labor up there to do something if their volume doesn't move very quickly, but at least your labor for moving somebody to there to do that work and then bringing them back is also covered. But yeah, that's a good one. That's quite a good one to get in and release. It's very new. It's only a couple of weeks old, so that's good.
Yeah. So we're currently scheduled that product showcase for the 29th of July. So if anyone's interested in what's been recently released in Q2, so up until the end of June, then that's definitely one that you don't want to miss. So 29th of July, we're going to be pushing that video out, and that will be very similar to Q1. So it'll be a mixture of all the different kind of major features that we've released. Obviously, there's only a short period of time, so we'll probably only showcase kind of 5 or 6 of the big features. But if you've got any questions on other features, then reach out to Clarus directly. One of the things that is currently in kind of active development now is an additional aspect of pricing that we've been asked for the last few months, and we're now looking at building something quite comprehensive. But it's another enhancement to the way that we handle pricing, and that's step pricing. Matt, do you want to talk us through the mechanics and how step pricing will be used across our customer base?
Yeah, so step pricing is essentially a tiered pricing approach. Initially, it's going to be released on picking. So it's effectively, if your user is already in the area and they don't have to walk back to the start and go back again, theoretically, that cost to pick as the more items you pick should drop. So it's set up so you can have a tier 1. That tier 1 is if I go pick anywhere between 1 and 10 cases, I'm going to charge 50p per case. If I'm already there and I've got to pick 50 more and it's the same product going to the same order, it moves up to the next band. That band could be right between 10 and 30 cases. I'm going to charge 35p because I'm moving less, I'm charging less. And there could be a third band that says right between 36 and 100 will charge 25p. Again, not hugely popular in one of the ones, the majority of projects that we see, but more and more prevalent with those customers that are linked into marketplaces that are moving large numbers of orders with similar product types, where they can batch those orders together and pick them all together because they're going to one place and they're going to pick them all in one go. So you're gaining the efficiency because you can go to one place and pick 50 orders worth of stock. Yeah. And then it's essentially, well, if you pick that many, then it should only cost you this much. So you've hit that tier band. So your charge per unit overall is reduced, but you're still paid overall for the time it's taken you to go and pick it. So it's quite powerful because theoretically it works both ways. It goes up and down. So if you think about, items where you're going to have to pick large items that take a lot of time to pick, and the more you pick stood in one place, you could lose a man for hours. So make sure your costs are covered because, warehousing is warehousing, right? It could be a pencil or it could be a V8 engine. You don't know what it could be. So you've got to make sure you can cover all eventualities of what those products are and what you have to service. And you'll find it more likely in SMEs than you will anywhere else, because the larger the business, the more you can streamline what you want to do and what you want to provide. So you can say, well, we do food. That's it. And we do it palletized and we do case pick. That's it. We don't do anything else because we're set up for it and we can just fly through it. SMEs and some of the smaller business, they will probably start with a little bit of everything because they need to fill their warehouse with something and they need to have customers that can cover their costs so they can invoice for. So you're likely to see a far wider breadth of product type within the same area, as long as they don't cross over each other, of course. You can't put food next to something that's got oil in it, but I've seen a little bit of everything. So I know that's not always the case.
Yeah, we see that during implementation, but we also see it during the kind of costed projects as well. And people, especially kind of the SMEs that you mentioned, once they get to a certain size, they probably want to sit down, take a bit of stock, realize what processes work and what are broken, usually get you and the guys back in, review the process, see what system's now capable of, rework everything and get the efficiency out of it. Because like you said, especially for some of the stuff that's been recently released, there is a bit of give and take. You're accurately charging for the things that are taking more time, but equally in the instance where, though, you're using batch picking as well as step pricing in the future, the customer will be effectively getting more value because the realistic charging for time actually matches rather than just having a flat rate where the customer looks at something and says, they've done 150 picks. Yeah, I got charged 100. No, I got charged £1.50 for every single one of those picks, but it all came from the same pallet. I've had experience with certain customers that have been had their customers push back on those kind of charges. And I actually know some of our 3PLs that have won deals off the back of their experience being similar.
Yeah. And I think if you've got a customer that's au fait with logistics and supply chain, right? Because there's lots of them out there. This is not a closed environment where people might not know what happens. Behind closed doors, it's rocket science because it isn't. So if you're within a supply chain type where people are switched on and they do get it and they understand the costs of what it takes to get something from a factory in China across the water into a warehouse and then out the door on a parcel delivery to someone's front door, they're going to know every cost all the way through that supply chain. So they are going to pin you to it and go, well, hang on a minute. Why are you charging me this much money for it? I'm sending you loads of volume here. Where's the discount for me? And rightly, you should say, as long as my costs are covered, I've got a margin in it, fine. So it's being able to do that. And I think we talked about this earlier on about if you spend less time digging through 500 invoices every Monday and Tuesday to make sure they're charged correctly, your questioning of what you do and what you're providing changes because you've got different information and you've got more time to do it. So you can actively say, do I want this customer and this product type in my warehouse? Is it giving me what we need as a business? Is it making me a profit? Is it something we want to do and actively go and chase? Or do we want more of that 80% that's just ticking along and making us cash and everything's great and it's easy to bill and it's easy to do and we can do more of it with the same people with less training? So, and they're all, decent steps to take if you're managing an operation of that type. It's just what you don't want is that hair on fire or that dread of getting up on a Monday morning and going on this invoicing day. It should be what we're chasing and how we're making this better and how much more money can we make and how can we get that margin? How can we be more efficient? How can I increase our margin but not really doing much? Because there's enough data there for me to think about it. Have I got my picks in the right place? Have I got my pick faces in the right place? Have I got the right trucks? Have I got enough doors? All that kind of thing. Because they're intrinsic, right? They're all linked to each other.
Okay. On that note, we're moving on to the final section, which is the Q&A. We've had quite a few questions actually. We've got a few minutes left over, so I'm going to try and blast through a few of these. So, Matt, we're going to take a bit of a steer from the last webinar we did and go for a bit of a rapid fire on some questions.
Okay. Do I get a prize at the end of it?
It depends how well you do. So, first question is for warehouses moving on to Clarus, are the top 3 chargeable activities? What are the 3 top 3 chargeable activities that operators are most surprised to find when they've not been billing customers for?
No, that's a good question because everyone knows a rental, everyone knows pick, and everyone knows receipt. It's the little bits underneath. They're the key ones. It's things like consumables, like pallets, and being able to capture what type of pallet they came in on and all that kind of thing, and whether that charge because we can set up storage unit types in the system that carry a different charge. So It might be you can receive a pallet, and if it's a white pallet, it's £2.50. But if it's CHEP and we have to administer CHEP through a separate function in our business, and because of that, we're going to charge a little bit more for it because we have to control it and all that kind of thing. So it really is like there's so many different ways you can do it, so many things you can think about. 3's tough. I'll be honest with you, 3's tough. The majority of customers we see know I want to charge for what comes in and what goes out and how long it's been here for. They're fairly straightforward. Containers, how long it takes to do a container, we got that captured. Can we set that on a receipt? Can we add it? Can the user add it via HHD? Yes. Do you trust them to? Slightly different conversation. But I think, overall, there's not, you couldn't put 3. There's just too many different types and different ways of doing it and different industries that require different things to be captured, essentially.
You're right. I think that rather than calling it 3, the main thing there is just making sure that we kind of go back to the main point that anytime a member of the team is doing something that isn't being captured by standard RH&D charges, that there's a charge associated to it, whether that be, handballing something, digging something, repalletizing, that big one in our industry is pallet comes off the back of a lorry and it's damaged and you guys have to, take it apart, restack it, rewrap it. There's a large charge there that sometimes people are just kind of going, well, we'll just put okay. We're about to run over and we've got one more question and then any other questions will be answered by email. But the one question we got here from someone was, does the scheduled pricing, does the scheduled charging and any of these other upgrades come as an existing plan or are they a paid add-on or an upgrade? The answer to that is that they're all part of your existing plan. We don't do upgrades. We you pay for one subscription, which is always the case. There is only one aspect of our system that is an additional add-on, which is the AI functionality that we're about to release. Every other part of your system that is standard functionality in WMS is part of the platform subscription that you pay for. If that sort of thing, we can say yes. If there is any other questions, feel free to drop them on. There'll be members of the team across all the different platforms that we're on. By all means, drop your questions in and someone will get back to you. Don't feel like you're just going to be, throwing that question into the wind. So just as a bit of a close, basically, what you've heard from Matt and the guys is that the tool and the upgrade is quite substantial, but equally more substantial is the effort that you're going to have to put in behind to make sure the process is captured effectively. You want to make sure that it's probably worth doing a time and motion study. It's probably worth doing a bit of a review on, where's the money being spent on your warehouse floor or your HR costs being spent, and are you recouping those costs with a bit of margin? And if the answer's, no, or you're not sure, it's definitely time to have a look at doing that before we get to peak season. And if you need a bit of help with that, I'm sure that the members of the team at Clarus side will be able to help as well, just in terms of guidance and sharing best practice. We've also got one tool that we want to quickly shout out as well. So if you go to claruswms.com, you will see a tool, and we'll also get the guys to share this, but there's a tool called the Billing Leakage Auditor, and effectively lets you answer some questions around the volume of orders and how you handle it. And it gives you a rough idea on what kind of revenue you could be leaking. Really good little tool. It takes about 5 minutes to use, but it's really good, pretty good start to that process of looking at, where are you at now and where could you be, especially in the this kind of macro environment where we're really feeling a bit of a pinch when it comes to margin. It's good to start internally and see where we can make some efficiencies before we start trying to push the revenue capture to our clients. Apart from that, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you on the 29th for the Q2 product showcase.